you ever heard of Robert Wadlow? Known as the Giant of Illinois, Robert Wadlow is the tallest person in recorded history, standing at 8 foot 11 inches. It would have been obvious to anyone in a room with Wadlow that he was the tallest person in the room. Less obvious is the fact that by virtue of being the tallest person in the room, Robert Wadlow was also a cause. Understanding what we mean by cause and how the maximum of something can be a cause will help us understand one of Thomas Aquinas' famous proofs for the existence of God. Today we are wrapping up our discussion on Aquinas' Fourth Way, which can be broken down into 7 steps. In the previous episode, we saw that since there are degrees of truth, there must be degrees of being. Step 4. What is more, because degrees of any property means that there must be a maximum version of that property, we then saw why step 5 is true. For if there is a maximum truth, then there must be a maximum of being. Now we will come to our exciting conclusion. But first, we must explain why step 6 must be true. Let's begin by recalling what step 6 says. Each maximum in any genus is the cause of all that is in that genus. At first glance, this statement seems to be implausible unless you are a Platonist. Why do I say that? Because Platonists believe in independent forms that are pure versions of the things they cause to exist on earth. But here's the thing. St. Thomas was not a Platonist, even if he had some Platonic influences. So this kind of statement seems out of place. How can we make sense of it in this argument? The first thing to note is that the use of the word genus may be confusing. Normally in philosophy, when we see references to a genus, we mean a universal property with multiple species under it. So when we think of human beings as a species, the genus of that species is animal, for humans are among the kinds of animals. But I do not think that this is the notion of genus that St. Thomas is using in this argument. Instead, I think he is using the word genus just to indicate the group of things that fall along a spectrum. As we have been discussing, when we talk about degrees of truth or being, we are talking about a multiplicity of things that are part of a group. In an important way, the spectrum or degrees by which we order the group is done in relationship to the greatest representative of that group, like the tallest person in the room. Once we recognize the tallest person in the room, then we can arrange the people in the room from tallest to shortest. This creates a certain sequence or ordering. Without the maximum of that group, you do not have the group of things that are more or less. But how is this maximum a cause? Well, consider the tallest person in a room. That person is, in an important sense, tall without qualification. That is, we cannot say that this tallest individual is short in comparison to anyone else. Now, it is the unqualified character of the extreme that is important here. Everything else along the spectrum of more and less of that quality is caused to be more or less by comparison with the unqualified greatest amount of that quality. This becomes more poignant when we consider being itself. Consider what it means to have being. Because of step 5, we know that being comes in degrees, for we know that truth comes in degrees, and truth depends upon being. Therefore, if being comes in degrees, there must be a maximum. But what makes one thing to have more being than another? It is whether or not that thing depends on something else in order to exist. So things that come into and go out of existence have less being than something that comes into existence but does not go out of existence. But if something comes into existence at all, it must depend on something else that does not come into existence. So that thing that does not come into existence must have more being. And if there are multiple things which do not come into existence, and they have being to different degrees, then there must be a maximum between them that is the result of not being dependent on anything else. And so if we keep going in this direction, we realize that not only must there be a maximum of being, but because being is measured in dependence and lack of dependence, this maximum must be independent and the cause of all things that depend on it. Therefore, that thing that has being maximally is a cause of the degrees of being in things that have it dependently. All of this means that if we accept the previous steps in the argument, this step immediately follows. Step 6 being true, then step 7 follows immediately from it. Of course, the maximum is a cause of the genus, insofar as the maximum is what tells us that there are degrees of being in the first place. Therefore, there must be some maximum member of the class of beings. And then St. Thomas tells us that this maximum being is what people call God. What then does this argument give us? Does it yet tell us that this God just is the Judeo-Christian God, who is one, simple, almighty? No. It tells us that there is such a thing as a God, a maximum being who causes being in the universe. It will turn out, as St. Thomas continues his arguments in theology, that we can prove that there is only one God, and that this is the Judeo-Christian God found in the Bible. But that is to get ahead of ourselves. All this argument proves is that given we accept the notion that being comes in degrees, there must be some maximum being by which we measure all things to be to a greater or lesser degree. Whatever this thing is, that is what we call God, and it must exist. Yes, this is a lot of work for only a little bit of doctrine, but this fourth way and these 5 ways are just the first steps in the larger task of summarizing all of theology. God, as we know and love him, will come to the fore quickly enough as the Summa proceeds. But as with everything, St. Thomas is careful to make sure that we follow the proper order so that we do not miss any steps along the way. That way we can be sure that what we conclude about God must be true. And so that is why even if this proof shows only a simple step, it is an important one. That is all I have for you concerning the fourth way. Please join us next time for the first episode discussing the fifth way. Until then, may God bless you and keep you in his grace. For readings, podcasts, and more videos like this, go to Aquinas101.com. While you're there, be sure to sign up for one of our free video courses on Aquinas. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share with your friends, because it matters what you think.